Hello everyone, this is part 4 of What If Naruto Ran Away from Home, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Roku Hashitoro, a rank missing ninja of Kusa. A 6-foot-tall man with light blue hair said, slamming the missing ninja's face into the counter of the bounty station on the outskirts of Waterfall Country. The bounty hunter squeezed his neck threateningly when he felt the captured ninja preparing to bolt, promising a swift death if he tried anything stupid. Roku didn't need to be alive for him to collect his bounty anyway. The man had his hands tied behind him, his mouth crudely taped shut with duct tape, his ankles tied together, and he sported worrying purple gashes all over his exposed torso and neck. His shirt had been torn off in the mad fray of his capture, and the bottom edges of his pants were slashed off at his knees, fraying like he had just barely escaped dying in a blender. Those sitting on tables in the bounty station winced at the thought of what the infamously merciless bounty hunter had done to his new capture. They murmured conversations around as the tall man patiently stared at the receptionist as she counted out 500,000 Ru from 500 bundles of 1,000 notes, of which the masked hunter hummed, watching the shaking woman go over the notes she had counted out, neatly arranged them into a stack and waved for 2 waterfall shinobi to take Roku away. The bounty hunter that retrieved the elusive and incredibly evasive Roku of the poison mushroom stared at the money on the counter through his smooth, black rectangular goggles, and the black-tinted visor briefly blinked red, returning back to normal faster than the receptionist could see. The black half-face mask he sported added to his cold, mysterious persona, and the grinning teeth drawn on the mask further instilled fear in the hearts of both the woman and the ninjas settled around in the station, with the mask molding under the black goggles, showing it was separate from the visors and also the same, somehow. He was wearing a long, featureless black cloak that just reached his ankles, showing he did not opt for the usual shinobi sandals, but rather he had on dark red with black soled boots. They clearly looked heavy, even without lifting him up, but for some reason the bounty hunter always managed to sneak up on his targets. 30 seconds passed of him simply staring at the money before the front of his cloak opened, showing the receptionist nothing as there was only blackness under, and a pair of dark red with black palmed gloves reached out with a scroll and sealed away the money, stashing it into his cloak and turning around smoothly. His cloak flapped in a flurry of non-existent wind as he exited the bounty station. It was still early in the afternoon, and all wondered whether he was heading back out to catch another high-ranking and very dangerous missing ninja. Roku was his third rank that week. He nudged open the door with his right hand and left the building. Out of sight and deep in the forest leading up to his current hideout, his body shimmered. He became significantly shorter, younger, and the cloak shrank with him so as not to drag on the ground. He slid behind a tree and heaved out a sigh, pushing his goggles up to his forehead and clicking off his half-mask so that it hung from his neck. He rubbed his tired eyes. Well done, boss. You now have enough to finish the satellite. Great. Naruto groused almost sarcastically, making I curious. I'm being followed, aren't I? Yes. Stalker has been identified as Sume Inuzuka and her ninken, Kuromaru. This was Naruto's 20th consecutively successful capture. He was bound to attract attention. Do you wish to engage her, sir? Yeah. It's best if I take her out before she becomes a recurring problem. He leaped into the tree line and moved away from the woman, also in the opposite direction of his hideout. Predictably, Sume followed suit with her dog companion shooting in a wide semicircle to cut Naruto off. Pack up my stuff and take it too, he hummed and clicked his half-mask back on, fixing his goggles back over his eyes and looking at a list of places he saw as inherently safe to hide for the meantime. Oniyuko Town, Demon Country. Right away, sir. I replied, and all the way back at Naruto's hideout, a clear 50 miles away from his current position, light blinked on in an abandoned underground bunker, and one could see the wild assortment of technology had personally created hanging from the walls, set on his work table, or parts littered on the ground. Naruto's duffel bag unfolded itself and slithered out from a dark corner of the room where his clothes were kept. There was a sharp click from that same corner of the room, and a pair of blue eyes opened from the floor, rising off the ground up 4 foot and levitating out, buzzing with energy. It was a 1 by 1 foot red cube-shaped robot that hovered off the ground with visible pulses of air and sound. Two thin pieces of metal came out from the sides and the very tip opened in 3 places, 3 finger-like additions to the robot, which it immediately used to fold Naruto's clothes into the bag. Another robot rose up from the work table and began cleaning the room of evidence while the boys' inventions whizzed and crumpled in on themselves, compacting into small sizes and shooting into a backpack. The lights eased out of the ceiling, taking with them an array of long wires out connected to the bottom of the bulbs and entered the technologically advanced backpack. Total darkness. Among the few things that couldn't fit into Naruto's tech backpack were dozens of heavy-looking, rectangular boxes of varying sizes and colors, all of which hummed and gathered together in the middle of the pitch-black room as if they were magnetically attracted to one another. Though, before they reached themselves they crumpled up and folded into half their size, buzzing and meeting the other similar boxes, piling up until they were about 10 feet tall and 7 feet wide. Back with Naruto, hot wind lifted him over Sume's partner and he could clearly see the amazement in the wise dog's eye. You have 3 more tails, boss. Ai's unhurried voice echoed in his ears and he saw 3 added blue blips on the map of his general vicinity, along with the yellow blips that marked Sume and Kuromaru. This, oddly reminds of when we left Konoha, huh, Ai? Yes, sir, it does. I'll use this chance to test my drones. Naruto said with a small undertone of an excited child itching to play with his new toys, and in a sense it was true. He studied what his supercomputer had gathered from the 3 further away pursuers, their chakra reserves, affinities, level of control and a vague assumption of who they were as compared to the bingo book Naruto had his computer analyzed 2 months ago. He had 3 S ranks after him and a ranked Tokubutsu Junin. It was good a time as any to pull out the best in his arsenal. Deploy combat drones, Alpha Lightning and Delta Water. Are you certain they would be enough, sir? I can also deploy Suicide Drone, Alpha Bomb to finish 'em off quickly. Naruto shook his head and skimmed his eyes over the map for any free place he could openly fight with his Inuzuka pursuers and finally settled on a massive lake at the bottom of a waterfall. Alpha Lightning and Delta Water are prototypes. I want to know if they are up to the task of repelling S-rank threats or if they need tweaking. Alright, sir. During Naruto's 2 months hiding from the whole world, it wasn't only his gloves and he had been working on, he had created a series of drones labeled according to their danger level and the strength of their attacks. They were combat and suicide drones and each of the 2 branches of Naruto's drones were split up into 4 distinct robots based on their power level and their sophistication, Alpha, Beta, Gamma and Delta. Naruto had 16 drones evenly split between combat and suicide and all were yet to be tested out on worthy opponents. They could be remotely controlled by Ai or Naruto at any time, as none had a consciousness of their own by Naruto's choice. If they are not up to the task then force a retreat. Lead the 3 S ranks to me. I was not against her master's plan, not completely, but its own concern was Naruto overexerting himself. He had just come back from a 2-day tracking mission finding Roku of the poison mushroom and now he was forced to evade capture from not 1 but 4 individuals and 1 capable dog. His focus was hand-to-hand during those tracking missions and now it was Naruto's chance to test his inventions. Naruto skipped onto the water, hovering with a low hum just over the surface and not using any chakra at all. He slid far away as Kuromaru dive-bombed him from above, crashing onto the water and creating a deadly shockwave. Naruto ground his teeth and lowered his center of gravity, steadying himself over the water he wasn't even touching and narrowed his eyes at the Ninken, who prowled around him with his one eye studying the genius. Naruto's goggles saw through the dog's skin, cutting into his bone and finding the dog was nursing a limp from a previous injury to his right hind leg. A potential weakness Naruto was willing to exploit. The now blue-haired boy stood up straight and cast off his black cloak, sealing it into the back of his gloves. He was wearing a short-sleeved black shirt with black shorts. His black with red-palmed and soled gloves and boots only served to add to the reputation the boy had been building as a bounty hunter. His red gloves stopped 3 inches from his wrists and segmented silver metal started coming out from the gloves and crept up to Naruto's elbows, covering his elbows right before Kuromaru's eyes. Sume witnessed as silver plates of metal rose up from Naruto's boots and covered up to a bit under his knees. He was noticeably without the katana blade Sume had heard the masked bounty hunter commonly used. Ai's metallic voice spoke to Naruto as this process finished. Armed and ready, boss. Naruto didn't provide any reply as he watched the reaction on his aunt's face at his transformation. Gone was the wide-eyed, eager to impress boy she saw grow, and now she was staring at the cold, heartless child that had built a fortress of technology around himself, fleeing from his life in Konoha to Kami knows where. Naruto's eyes flicked up and a visual of both combat drones played on the top left corner of his goggles, proving that it was indeed Sasori of the Red Sands, the Mad Bomber Deidara and the bloody Uchiha, Itachi. The drones buzzed high in the air, far away from reach from two of the grounded shinobi, and fired off attacks. The Alpha Lightning whizzed around a rain of senbon from Sasori and crackled with blue lightning, shooting it at a puppet that clanked upwards through the air at it. The lightning blew open the puppet and followed down the thread to Sasori, who wisely cut the connection before he was killed by the lightning manipulation of Alpha Lightning. Delta water spun around Itachi as the prodigious Uchiha blew out columns of fire at the robot with the motivation of an uncaring stranger, but the water manipulation using Delta water dove under the fire and a stream of chakra-less water tore from the three small guns at the front, something that made Itachi bring his fire attacks down, slightly amazed that the small, featureless robot was holding its own against his fire. I brought Naruto out of his distracted daze, fascinatedly watching his drones hold off two of the S ranks but sighing as Deidara left his comrades to their plight in order to go to his target. Very soon, Itachi and Sasori would switch drones and Naruto figured he would have to order a retreat. The Inuzuka stared at the boy and scratched her red fang-painted cheek. She jumped over the obvious question of what had forced this drastic change in her precious adopted nephew and why he had fled from home and said, "What's the plan now, kid? I kill you and your ninken. Kill those S ranks and disappear again. That's the plan," the blue-haired boy answered, hinting at the Inuzuka's preventable demise if she decided to look the other way and allow Naruto to flee. He assumed Kakashi had given his mother reasonable warning of what would happen if anyone else was to come after him, and so far Orochimaru was steering clear of him, for the time being. From what she had seen of Kakashi, Naruto wouldn't mind killing her or Kuromaru, and that raised her heckles. The thought of the incoming S ranks temporarily left her. "Oh, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, pup." Naruto settled into a fighting stance when he saw Tsume growl at him, her eyes wild and her teeth clenched together fiercely. Kuromaru followed his partner's lead, copying her controlled rage and preparing to pounce at Naruto. Naruto's black palms glowed with white energy as he held his right hand facing down, chest level, and his left was straight forward and also facing down. His knees were bent and were shoulder length apart, his right was slightly in front of the left and his head tilted down. The experienced Inuzuka recognized the fighting stance immediately and, strangely enough, she saw a mental image of Naruto's mother when she was 13 years old in Naruto's place. It was the fighting style Kushina had fully mastered and used during their fight during Inchunin exams, even used till that day. The steam scorpion fighting style. Her mind didn't want to remember what the woman had done to her using the style during their match in River Country, but her body forced her to. A ruptured kidney, 4 broken ribs, a fractured femur and a dislodged lung. She wasn't sure how she had survived that fight, but it had cemented Tsume's place under Kushina. The red-haired woman was the alpha, in Tsume's opinion. The dominant in whatever twisted relationship she had with the married woman. Just thinking about how Kushina could break her will and her resolve as a human being by being in Tsume's general area made her heart shudder with pleasure. She fought her desire down and brought her mind back on track when Kuromaru glared at her to focus. Her snarl settled back in place, but Naruto already saw the waves of emotions pass over the woman's face. He could smell her desire. I sent a small shock into his body once his eyes widened and his limbs froze in horror. The supercomputer muffled its master's voice with the technologically advanced half-mask. I need to get away from her. He looked up sharply, snapping out of his fear, when someone screamed down at him from the sky. Die, Namika's shit. The world moved slowly as a blurry swarm of clay birds squawked down at him from the bomber, who was standing on a large drill-beaked bird. Naruto fixed his eye on one clay bird and I analyzed it, breaking it down to its very base components. Naruto raised his hands up, facing him at the swarm, and the white light glowed brighter and brighter, until Naruto muttered. Chaos wind shock wave. The best way to describe what happened next was by saying that gravity gave out and the whole world groaned. Oh. The ground shook. The air exploded. An unseen force pressed down on them, the robots they were fighting included. Sasori's hands shook as he fought to keep himself from succumbing to the pressure, and Itachi blinked numerous times and grit his teeth in concentration, visibly fighting the force from bringing him to his knees. The robots they had been engaged with crashed into the ground and whined loudly, blaring out alarms that they were about to shut down. Then, almost abruptly, the pressure eased off them and the lightning and water-using robots wobbled off the ground weakly, sparking and squealing, shakily rising high into the air much too quickly for the two recovered S-ranks to destroy them. They only saw the flying contraptions shooting southwest of them, disappearing not too long later. Their lack of chakra was clearly annoying both of the feared shinobi, and they tore towards the source of the earth-shattering shock wave. What the hell was that? Sasori asked, confused and still getting over the feeling of being pressed down by seemingly nothing. After his question was voiced, they could both think of who could possibly, according to the reports, produce such a devastating attack. Naruto's eyebrows visibly creased over his goggles as he stared at the product of the catastrophe. Maybe I used too much power. Clumps of clay fell from the sky like rain, and so did drops of water from what used to be the lake, and what was now a wide crater in the ground with a dripping source of water that used to be called a waterfall. No doubt the waterfall would recover and refill the lake, but it would take some time for that to happen. Tsume groaned from the ground, where she had been standing when Naruto had thrown the wide-scale attack, and her chest throbbed. Maybe she could add this injury to the list of injuries caused by the two Uzumaki. She whimpered when she couldn't feel her limbs or her chakra, not even thinking twice to know that it was Naruto that had brought this upon her and her partner. 2 months in and he was still getting used to the increased power output of his gloves and boots, as opposed to the combat inventions he created back in Konoha, because these newer inventions were mostly solar-powered, having chakra as their secondary source of power, and it was not only lighter to carry than his older model but also sleeker. Compared to the older model, it was like Naruto was carrying nothing, and as such he would overestimate how much power he needed to push out. Naruto flexed his right hand and tightened his hold on Deidara's hair, raising the older blonde up a bit and taking off his half mask. You're wearing the same kind of cloak Kisame had when I killed him. The boy mused audibly, sweeping his black-tinted goggle-protected eyes over the weak form of the mad bomber. Naruto caught the man as he fell from the sky and summarily shut down his connection to his chakra with a well-placed, widespread chakra destabilizer. There was a fair bit the genius could do with his supply of tech as long as he overplanned how he would accomplish it. Like the wind shock wave that had possibly broken all of Kuromaru's bones, was a combination of wind and a wave of sound so low that it couldn't be perceived by anyone that wasn't attuned to detecting earthquakes. It had gone as far as 3 miles from his location and had broken his 2 drones, forcing them to flee early so they could be repaired by him later on. I was currently sifting through the video feed of it controlling the drones and noting down where they lacked and where needed adjustments, so Naruto pushed the drones from his mind before he could start conjuring alterations to his inventions, focusing on the limp Iwa missing ninja in his hand. Some sort of organization that is under the radar. He mumbled. Underworld. Probably. What the fuck? Deidara growled in a raspy voice, unbelievably weakened in pain at being held up by his blonde hair. Are you talking about? Who do you work for? Naruto asked once, contemplating whether or not to classify the Red Cloud-wearing organization as a threat and if he should take action by eradicating them before they could find a way around his tech and get him. I'm not gonna ask you again, Deidara. Then it clicked in Naruto's mind and he sighed, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Why am I asking you? He called and the computer promptly answered. Yes, boss. Naruto used his other hand to grab Deidara by his jaw, covering his mouth and stopping the grumbling stream of profanity coming from his mouth. The boy looked at the Iwa missing ninja's blonde hair and his glasses scanned them, and even without the scan he could notice something familiar. Are those water droplets in his hair? Yes, sir, they are. Water mixed with chakra. Water mixed with chakra. The boy asked, more to himself than anything. Aside from the water drops falling from above, caused from his shockwave attack, he could see a distinct difference with his glasses. A presence of chakra in the water. Affinity. A perfect mix of all 5, sir. Naruto pursed his lips in thought. The chakra is weaved in equal measure to each drop of water, so chakra rain that is not harmful. He then scratched his chin and his eyes lowered to think long and hard. Chakra rain, chakra rain, chakra rain, chakra rain. He posed his next question to his faithful computer. Show me the map of the continent and highlight places of high water level and constant rain, not constant mist. River, waterfall, marsh, Azushio and Amigakure glowed blue. Omegakure is the only place on the continent that rains all day and all night, sir. That's right, and river and marsh countries are popularly neutral. Waterfall have no reputable gangs, not to talk of underworld organizations with S-rank missing ninjas. That last point he knew all too well, for one of his capture missions was clipping off the head of the leader of an infamous gang and submitting the leader's head as proof of the kill. Besides the A rank the leader, the members were largely B and C rank. They were scattered when their leader died, and it was relatively easy picking them off one by one. Azushio too is barren of any life since the Uzumaki were wiped out. I noticed he referred to the famed and almost extinct clan as if he was not among. Rather, Naruto was an honorary member by birth for being the son of the princess of the Whirlpool, the red-hot-blooded habanero, Kushina Uzumaki. If anything, his name should have been Naruto Namikaze or Uchiha, but Kushina had imposed her will on her husband and gave her child her clan name out of the great love she had for him in her heart. Her master might as well not have any surname. No one has been in AM since the Second Great Ninja War, so that makes it all the more possible they've recruited S-ranked missing ninjas to some sort of secret organization. Zetsu was impressed at how quickly Naruto had figured out not only the existence of the Akatsuki but also the location of their main base. He wondered if he should step in and convince Naruto to align his loyalty with him instead of with Pain. Will they be a threat or not? That's what I'm wondering. He removed his left hand from his chin and placed his pointer and thumb on Deidara's windpipe. The man's eyes widened with terror when he realized what the boy intended to do to him. Naruto shrugged, not having a care in the world. Either way, I don't see why I should keep you alive. Naruto was about to rip Deidara's windpipe from his neck. A prospective death so agonizing that Deidara began screaming in earnest, trembling with all his might so that Naruto would release him and he could flee from this blue-haired monster. The boy's fingers tightened on the blonde's neck and gradually dug in, closing off all air from the bomber's lungs. Deidara's face started turning an unpleasant shade of purple, then blue and then a pale gray as Naruto got a good grip on the man's windpipe. His wrist flicked, but he stopped when he heard his name from across the crater. Naruto, wait. He hovered up as water slowly filled the crater from the drops falling from the heavens, and Deidara choked when Naruto used his grasped windpipe to hold him up. Naruto was clearly not concerned with the dying blonde he held with his left thumb and pointer finger. His goggles cut through the small rain and his eyes met Itachi's. The three Tomo Sharingan spun lazily and Naruto hummed, displeased. Genjutsu successful, repelled, boss. Naruto tilted his head to the side and Itachi saw that his hypnotic eyes had not worked. His was overcome with shock that his Sharingan had, for the first time in his life, failed him. He tried again. Genjutsu successfully repelled. I repeated as it once again deflected an illusion from its master, aided by Naruto's eternally activated Sharingan eyes. Genjutsu successfully repelled. You know, this is a horrible first impression, Itachi. Naruto called from the middle of the gradually filling crater. He knew of his aunt Mikoto's oldest son but never really spoke to him, or saw him for that matter. There was only that brat Sasuke, who was 3 years younger than him, and Naruto chose not to associate much with the daddy-pleasing boy. He had read that Itachi had snapped and killed half of his clan mates before his mother and her best friend, Kushina, who had been staying in the Kurama clan compound with Naruto, had the oldest Uchiha flee from them. Naruto was 9 when that happened, and despite that he couldn't use the confusion to sneak away, not until a month later when Kushina was out on a mission. The feats of wonders Itachi had performed was something of an interest to Naruto, a small interest, because the older Uchiha was known to not resort to violence in most situations, unless it could be avoided. It was why Itachi used illusions instead of specializing in another field, like Kenjutsu. Naruto saw small blue dots gather on the edges of the crater and he noticed small wisps of chakra coming from Sasori. He promptly said, "Let's not do that, Sasori. I have your friend." "Yeah, friend, here, and he'll be missing a windpipe if either of you make any sudden moves." Deidara's body tensed and his mouth gaped like a fish out of water as Naruto emphasized his point by holding on harder to the immobilized bomber's throat. It was best to address this situation now and avert any problem in the future, so he skipped over asking the morbidly surprised Uchiha and spoke to the cool, pleasantly smiling puppet man. "What do you guys want with me?" Deidara was getting grayer and grayer, entering the throes of death, suffocating as Naruto's fingers made it increasingly harder for him to breathe. His chest shook and he inhaled and exhaled shallow breaths, completely paralyzed and at the mercy of the Namikaze child he had underestimated from the very beginning. Tsume and Kuromaru, unable to move due to the inventor's destabilizers and forgotten by the blue-haired genius, laid at the bottom of the slowly filling lake. Kuromaru was unconscious, unable to take the pain of having a majority of his bones broken, while Tsume was making futile attempts at moving towards her partner. She couldn't scream, as the water had risen above her head and the weight holding her arms down, as well as her lack of contact with her chakra, made her roar in desperation. This boy, Kushina's son, had brought not only her down but an S-ranked madman with only one attack. If she survived, then she was going to submit her mind, body and soul to the two Uzumaki. It took more than anything to bring her down. The suitors her mother had showed her when she was a child and those brave enough to flirt with her knew this deadly, daring fact very well. She had dismantled more than her fair share of people in the recent week and she intended to do so for the rest of her life until someone even slightly close to Kushina's power level was found. Oddly enough, her current predicament reminded her of what Kushina had done to her to force it into her head that failure to capture her son was not an option. Tsume's head had been forced into a bathtub of water and held there, while the submissive woman flailed wildly, bubbling out for mercy. That act had turned her on more than anything in her life, and being submerged in water and completely forgotten by her target, her adopted nephew, spiked pleasure throughout her body. Her mind was a haze as she struggled not to let water flood her nose and mouth, gurgling for her new master's attention. Her depraved sense of pleasure overloaded her brain alongside the desperation to breathe and, twitching and convulsing under the water with the hope of saving her partner's life somewhere, at the back of her mind, her body locked up, her mouth flew open and she climaxed. The thundering force of her release was enough to knock her out. Naruto had completely forgotten about his drowning aunt and I made a small note for him to do something about her before its master left the area. For the meantime, he listened to what Sasori had to say as Deidara's life drained from his body. After the legendary puppet master had finished promoting the Akatsuki to him, with some input by the still dumbfounded Uchiha, to the satisfaction of Zetsu, who Naruto had long since detected and kept a secure lock on all this time, Naruto opened his mouth and gave his answer. No. Naruto's words echoed a minute after Sasori had finished explaining why the 3S ranks were there and why Naruto should join their cause. Naruto tilted his head to the side and his lips dipped down as his mind worked. I'm not interested in joining the Akatsuki. Itachi couldn't say he wasn't surprised by the child's answer, but he still found his eyes bulging. He pursed his lips, still shocked that his Sharingan illusions were deflected not too long ago, and said, Naruto, think about this for a minute. I already have. Naruto said, releasing Deidara and not watching as the half-dead mad bomber splashed into the shallow water he was hovering above. He looked to be dead anyway, unresponsive, unmoving, not breathing, as pale as the moon. Your interests don't align with mine at all. You want to gather bounties for some mysterious reason I'm not allowed to know unless I actually join this exclusive club of yours. I'm not interested in fighting forever, especially not for a cause I don't know. I politely decline your invitation. There was silence for 5 long minutes, almost as if time was frozen. A boy several years their junior had declined to join the gang of S ranks. It would have been better if Naruto said he wanted some time to think about their exclusive offer. Sasori's wooden body clicked before he even moved. Blazing blue chakra strings exploded from the tips of his Hiriko puppet armor as well as the hunched spine of the terror-inducing puppet. The strings grabbed the drowning mad bomber and the 2 Konoha ninjas from under, adding as well at least 10 more, white-clothed puppets of varying types and designs, all armed with an array of weapons. Naruto clicked his half-mask back in place and shot backwards as Itachi spat out a ball of molten fire from his mouth. He skipped onto the water, the constantly humming white energy keeping him about half an inch from the surface of the water, and he hastily raised his shin to block a roundhouse kick from Itachi as the S-ranked Uchiha appeared from out of nowhere before him, the silver plating from his boots to under his knees clinking on contact. The genius Uzumaki's eyes narrowed and his right fist was slapped aside when 4 of his fingers made to tear into Itachi's throat, forcing him to roll to the side with the motion else Itachi rip off his goggles and try his hand again at the illusion. The boy righted himself again and pointed his left palm at his opponent, ablaze with white energy ever ready to decimate whatever was before it, but withdrew his hand back as quickly as possible as 2 fang over fang attacks almost ripped his arm out of its socket. Water manipulation. Inverted Senbon hailstorm. Naruto growled and slammed his palms down onto the rising body of water below him. Thud. Betum. A shockwave resonated through the water, ripples carrying from his position in the middle of the lake to the very edges, where Sasori was controlling Sume, Kuromaru, Daidara and his puppets to rain down on the boy. A bone-shaking sound too low and too fast to be noticed by any normal person whistled through the water. Sume and Kuromaru dove at him again for another attempted fang over fang to rend the 13-year-old boy to pieces. They were clearly not in control of their bodies and their minds were vacant as they were long since unconscious from drowning. Water dribbled out of their mouths in large spurts and blood seeped from their noses in trickling lines. Daidara was conscious though unable to muster the strength to move his body himself. He skipped over the water, under Sasori's control and bolted to his target's position. The white-clothed puppets did so as well, clattering and whistling with murderous intent. Itachi chose to keep his distance in case the boy used his chakra-canceling attack, staying at the edge of the lake and skimming around with focused eyes, his Sharingan straining and spinning wildly in his orbs to see what the boy wanted to do. Spikes poked out from the surface of the water. Itachi turned to Sasori and was about to yell for him to pull back. It was too late. Dark blue water senbon shot upwards from the lake and impaled anything that moved and breathed on its surface. It was like looking at the world's first inverted hailstorm, except the solid attacks were made from 3-inch long, hard water that had lethal pointed tips. It was something straight out of a science fiction novel. There was no set of hand seals or jutsu that could conjure such a devastating attack, only if the person had soaked the water with his chakra previously and used it as an extension of his body, and yet it would still take too long to do and would take a toll on the user. The needles rising upwards in a blinding hail of rain lodged themselves deep in the puppets and it was only when Sasori released Sume and Kuromaru was he able to activate safety seals, half a second and hundreds of senbon stabs later, to deflect the needles. The force of the rising senbon stabbed, slashed and shredded the Konoha ninja and her ninken and carried them upwards into the sky, disposing them hundreds of feet away from the lake and into the surrounding forest. Needles perforated every single part of their bodies and it was just enough to force them out of their water-induced unconscious state. Her chakra was back but her body was stuffed like a pincushion, preventing her limbs and joints from moving and driving a horrible sort of pain into her body. Knowing that it was Naruto that had caused this pain, her eyes threatened to roll into the back of her head with soul-damning pleasure, but she barely activated the tracking seal on her back by focusing chakra to the small of her back before she blacked out once again. The T&I department would see her tracker was on and, suspecting she needed reinforcements, would come and get her. Daidara was in a similar state, except there were about 20 long needles cutting through his eyes and into his brain. He hung limply from a tree branch. Dead. Itachi grabbed Sasori before the puppet master could lose his mind and pulled him back, abandoning the white-clothed, needle-perforated puppets to their fate as Naruto shot straight up dozens of miles above the waterfall. The rising needles never once touching him as he flew into the sky, over the dense forest. His goggles kept track of the fleeing S-ranks as they weaved through the trees of the near forest. His hands flattened against each other and he held it up to his chest. Another sound, this time short and violent, rocked through the air. The water senbon froze. The silence was stifling, only interrupted by the pattering of the retreating ninja's feet on the lush grassy ground. Naruto's eyes cut through the haze of water senbon, all still pointed upwards, and locked onto the small, though vital, cluster of nerves on the back of Itachi's neck and tried to do the same with Sasori, but the closest to the important bundle of life-supporting nerves was a single, blaringly bright, but super-suppressed, source of chakra inside the Hiriko shell. The boy activated the X-ray vision of his goggles without so much as uttering a word and saw the real Sasori working frantically to run, spawning strings from his fingers, which originated from the cylinder. Targets locked, sir. The unheard buzz of sound from Naruto's gloves and boots amplified so that it sounded like an eerie whistle. The genius separated his palms and he pointed it at the two ninjas. Naruto calculated the distance, taking into account the extra layer of armor for Sasori, and applied the needed amount of energy to painfully send him to the afterlife. If Sasori and Itachi could have heard Naruto through his voice-muffling half-mask, then they would have applied even more chakra to their legs to run. Fire. Zip 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 zip. Millions of senbon, none of which had a single drop of chakra, zipped towards their target from Naruto, bending around trees and shrubs and keeping above the ground. Itachi's Sharingan morphed and he disappeared in a flurry of crow feathers, but in his haste he forgot his sole surviving partner, who did not have any kind of teleportation ability. The senbon initially spread out and carved out the back of the Hiriko puppet, creating a gaping hole from where there used to be a solid iron tail and hunched spine, exposing the puppet master. This happened within 30 seconds, so Sasori's absolute surprise at his armor puppet being torn open was justified. He wasn't allowed any more time for surprises as the water, after another pulse of sound from far behind him, converged a bit closer and drove into his heart seal from behind, not allowing him the chance to turn around and provide any sort of defense. The old puppet master gasped, and in his distraction, his right side slammed into a tall, thick tree, destroying what was left of his already shredded Hiriko puppet armor, sending him out and crashing through two smaller but no less strong trees. A spasm rocked his body, and then he realized that his lower half had also been torn to wooden pieces by the rain of senbon, which had stopped after he had hit those trees. His fingers twitched and his mouth creaked open and shut, futilely trying to summon his chakra to defend himself as he heard a pair of feet land close to his body with a chilling thunk. Naruto looked down at the once proud Suna missing ninja as the throes of death overtook him. His eyes frantically blinked, his mouth creaked and groaned, sounding like a small dying animal, and Naruto could see the chakra pulse out of the perforated heart seal with his computer goggles, enhanced by his red, eternally activated Sharingan eyes. The Akatsuki robe the ninja had been wearing was in tatters, showing him to be in a simple sleeveless black shirt and what used to be brown ninja pants. The boy stomped to the dying ninja and scanned his body briefly. He gave a light smile when he saw small storage seals on the puppet man's body, no doubt holding his infamous puppets. Lord Leader will kill you, brat. Sasori wanted to roar, but his jaw was unresponsive, probably due to a few needles lodged in the back of his head. 2 dead S ranks, Naruto commented and stared down at the dying ninja. He had previously ordered Ita, unmuffle his half mask so Sasori would hear him. One of which could have been prevented if you left me alone. He stood over the disgraced ninja and placed his right foot on the heart seal, slowly pressing down and making the wooden man's eyes enlarge with realization. The holes burrowed by the previous water needles had done the job of incapacitating him, and now the boy was here to personally finish the job. Naruto tilted his head to the side and unhooked his half mask, showing his slight frown. Let's make it 3 S-rank deaths. Crunch. Sasori of the Red Sands' eyes dimmed. Zetsu dared not approach as Naruto turned to his position. Pain was not going to be happy. Oh. 2 days later. Somewhere in Demon Country. Thunder rumbled through the sky and blazing blue bolts of lightning crackled down from the heavens, smashing into the ground and scorching the rain-soaked earth. Any living creature that made the mistake of being outside during this storm was almost assured to be struck by lightning. For some people, seeing lightning shooting down from the sky was a death wish, but for Naruto, he saw it as an alternative power supply for when the sun was not present. And even if the sun was present, he would have preferred the sheer, direct electrical energy in lightning than the rigorously processed form that could be gotten from the sun. The wind screamed in the boy's ears and the heavy downpour matted down his newly dyed gray hair to his head, making some of the dye wash off so that patches of his naturally sunny blonde hair showed through the gray. The genius stomped forward steadily, his tech boots fastening firmly to the ground with a combination of hardening the muddy ground with a quick blast of heat and a strong suction. In his tech-gloved covered right hand was a 10-foot-long metal rod that was about 2 inches in diameter, while his left covered the top of his goggled eyes, shading his vision from the blinding rain. He trusted the map his computer companion was showing him to not lead him off the cliff he was on. The dark green and white rain poncho he was wearing flapped dangerously on his body, looking as if at any moment it would rip off his torso and fly off to wherever the wind took it. He made sure to hold the metal rod away from his body and facing upwards to the sky, his gloved hands tightly gripped on the piece of metal with all his human and technologically amplified might. Naruto grit his teeth and hissed as a particularly strong wave of wind and rain smashed into him from in front, making sure to keep walking on with his slow, careful pace. His booted feet made muffled thumps on the ground with each stomp, and Naruto's hidden red eyes looked around with as much calmness he could muster and asked, his voice completely silent from outside his half-mask. Is this far enough? He winced when an arc of lightning crackled down and struck the metal pole. The bolt passed through the rod, deflected away from the insulated gloves and entered the ground in the blink of an eye. Naruto was thankful for his gloves more than he had ever been before, for that was the 9th bolt of lightning to hit the rod. I spoke loudly back, though making sure not to damage its master's ears. Yes, sir. Naruto grabbed the rod with both hands and raised it over his head, bringing the end down and sinking it down into the earth. He held it with both hands and pushed it further down into the soft, wet ground and stood back before another bolt crashed into the metal rod. Naruto used his right hand to hold the front of his rain poncho and squinted his eyes up to the tip of the lightning conductor. Open it up. The very tip hissed and a white line crawled down 5 inches from the tip, dividing the top into 4, and it snapped open abruptly to form 4 open points. Naruto inched forward a little and tapped the rod once, and a glowing red panel on the back of his right glove opened up, like a hologram but much more advanced than the ones he used before. He swiped left and used his other pointer finger to turn a holographic dial. The sky rumbled dangerously and the boy squinted again with his eyes up on the divided tip of the lightning conductor. This time, white-hot lightning flew down and smashed onto the tech rod, but instead of flowing down into the ground like it was supposed to, it bounced off the open tip and shot through the rain to another conductor, which also had an open top, and made the lightning, still as deadly as it had been coming down from the sky, bounce off the top into a last conductor on the top of a small uprising with a human-sized opening at the front, Naruto's current hideout. Naruto could see his lights flicker, showing that it had worked. The cave Naruto had made his temporary home stood close to the edge of a cliff. The top was covered in lush green grass, which was presently overcome with the rain, and could easily be confused with a real hill. The genius had previously placed 9 more conductors strategically around his hideout, one to actually take the force of the incoming bolt, and another rod received the passed-on bolt, which was immediately passed to the last one at the top of the uprising, passing the current into the base and through a complex network of wires. Naruto stayed where he was, wincing slightly with each crack of lightning that narrowly missed him but diverted to his conductor, and he swiped at the bright red hologram console floating over the back of his glove and moved away the dial. His goggles showed the 9 other dials at full blast, so he cycled through a few options on the glove hologram until he reached one that controlled all the dials. His left pointer finger touched the hologram and slowly moved it down. Turn on the lights. I quickly did so, and blaring white lights flashed on. Naruto continued turning the dial down and the lights dimmed with it until they were at the normal brightness, despite the electricity passing through them. He shook his hand and the red hologram fizzled away. He roared over the rain, admiring the conductor before him. Charge my satellite's battery. All right, sir. How long until it's full? 5 days, sir. It's better than before, he replied, pleased with his lightning rod inventions. He began making his way back to his hideout. Though the sun was a good and reliable source of power, it would take too long for it to fully charge the battery he intended to use for his satellite. That battery was a lot larger than the ones he used for his gloves, boots and even his goggles, as it was meant to serve Naruto in space for an indefinite number of years. He wanted it to be fully charged before he shot it into orbit, where it can slowly take in solar energy from the sun. He was still a long way from finishing the satellite to his satisfaction, as he needed to buy more good quality parts to work with, but with the completion of the battery for his satellite, his prospective invention was already 70% finished. He relished in his achievement as he marched back to his base. A massive storm was rolling through Demon Country from the ocean and would subside greatly once it reached Fire Country, and Naruto's weather forecast promised it would last a week before the lightning would reduce drastically and the rain would subside. If he had relied on the sun, his plan would have taken much longer. The storm itself was unexpected but not unappreciated, as the boy smiled a bit widely under his mask, holding the front of his poncho and shading his goggled eyes. Naruto's satellite, aptly called the Hyper Sight, was an invention that would finally allow Naruto to relax even more if it was successfully launched into space. It would keep an eye on the world for any possible danger moving to him, whether it was human or natural, warn him and he would be prepared for it. For it was possible a speedster like the Raikage of Kumo or faint presence like the one he had sensed 2 days ago when he was with Itachi, Sasori and Deidara, could shoot to him before his senses, or I could even make him aware, not to even talk of him being ready to defend himself. It would also give him a more detailed map of the planet, identify everyone on the planet and reveal secrets no one else would have known. He didn't care much on spying on everyday people, but there were those that he needed to keep a close eye on. And anyway, it won't be him doing the watching, it would be I. His senses and eye's sensory field combined was still limited to 5 miles, at his current age, but the Hyper Sight would expand this to cover the whole world. Some would think this was too much, but Naruto would beg to differ. Being paranoid had kept him alive and partly sane for years, and it would do so for the rest of his life, which he hoped would be peaceful and quiet. Naruto's ultimate plan after he had finished all his listed inventions was to move to a solitary island with his tech and spend the rest of his life in solitude. That's really all he ever wanted. I would keep him company, as the supercomputer was gradually growing more and more sentient, but he wanted to live away from any more human contact. Life for him, presently, was one struggle after another. One trauma after another. One betrayal after another. He was just tired. Learning how to fight was so as to ensure he wasn't harassed like he had been for the majority of his life, and yet he still couldn't completely kick his fear of women. Technology was invented so that he didn't have to directly face his fears without being paralyzed, rendering him unable to move, unable to breathe, and unable to think. His tech gave him some confidence, which had saved him from succumbing to hysteria a number of times. That was another thing, his hysteria. It didn't end with him freezing within absolute fear in the presence of a powerful female, and not only his mind becoming a jumbled mess, screaming for him to flee, or at least move his body away, but not able to respond at all. No. In Naruto's hysteria, his mind shattered, and it was like his soul was trapped in his body, yearning for the sweet release of death but wrongly forced to endure the punishment of the eternal torment of living through his nightmares. Naruto's sanity deteriorated and crumbled to nothing with every passing day, day after day of silent, muted hysteria, exposed to the one person that could bring that dreaded side out of him. His mother was the only person that made Naruto hysterical. She didn't even need to be around for him to become paralyzed with fear and lose all sense of reason. It got worse with time until Naruto feared he would become a simple soulless husk if he didn't do something about it. I shocked his system when it felt Naruto's muscles tense painfully, freeing him from the memories earlier in his life and onto the matter at hand. The further away he was from her, the better. He ducked through the entryway of his hideout and turned around to slam the recently installed metal door shut. He breathed raggedly as he ambled around so that he faced the wall next to the door, taking off his rain poncho and hanging it on a bent nail in the wall close to the door. He rubbed his gloved hands together and white energy hummed softly from the circular area on his black palms, drying the water from the gloves and warming his hands in the process. His boots followed suit and dried themselves, after which he moved deeper into the cave, through a short tunnel that sloped downwards, where a soft white light pulsed soothingly from the area at the end of the tunnel. His soaking wet shirt and pants irritated him a lot, and so when he entered the well-lit area he threw off his shirt and kicked off his pants, leaving him in only a pair of warm orange boxes. The cave was spacious enough to contain a freshly carved work table, devoid of parts or paper, 3 large, black rectangular boxes sitting at the far corner of the cave, his duffel bag and backpack, both empty, were neatly folded and placed in a drawn normal wooden desk near the 3 metal boxes. There was a makeshift wardrobe that housed all of his articles of clothing, at the bottom of which had his toolbox, his maintenance kit and his repair kit. The ground was smooth and out rocks that were frigidly cold if he were to walk on them barefooted. The cave was cold. He shivered and muttered. Heaters. A low buzz emanated from behind him to his left and right, at the sides of the immediate entrance to the cave. 2 circular fans wedged high on the wall with more nails whirred gently, and a metal grate gradually turned red with heat. The fan lightly blew this heat outwards into the cave, and Naruto shivered again, plodding to his wardrobe for warm clothes while the heaters did the job. He took off his gloves and kept them on the work table, picking out a thick purple sweater and black shinobi pants, having to briefly take off his boots to put on the latter piece of clothing. He returned to his work table and put on his gloves. The plates of metal that usually wound up to his elbows and knees were noticeably not there, as he had not activated their combat uses yet. Under the table were more metal boxes, most of which were a different color or a different size, but his attention was not on them but on the table. Dim the lights a bit. The computer answered and reduced the intensity of the light until Naruto said, "That's enough." Now the lights could still illuminate the room a little bit, but it couldn't exactly be used to read. The blonde gray-haired boy hefted up a 5 by 5 foot mirror from under the work table, on top of the metal boxes, and placed it onto the table. He snapped his fingers and 2 hologram projectors a few meters apart and pointed down at an angle over the table popped on, shooting out soft blue light and creating a pillar of light that rose up from the mirror. Naruto immediately went to work on confirming the things he needed to get before his satellite could be finished, all of which could only be gotten in Kumo and Snow Country, both of which were all the way on the other side of the continent. He was also looking for a good fuel for the rocket that would launch his satellite into orbit, something stronger than gas. As he worked, his black-tinted goggles animatedly whirring, I tentatively prodded. Boss. The Akatsuki, sir. Naruto paused and lifted an eyebrow. What about them? Sir, why did you turn them down? The boy snorted and shook his head, returning to scouring the globe for a good fuel source for the rocket he intended to build. Aside from Deidara trying to blow me up, obviously bearing a grudge on me that I can't really care to find out, and how Itachi tried to put 3 Sharingan genjutsus on me before they even tried to convince me to join the Akatsuki. Their first impressions not too closely taken into account, Naruto had a valid reason for not agreeing to join. Yes sir, besides all that, I wanted to clear its non-existent throat in embarrassment that it had once again overlooked something so clear. Naruto's health and safety was the computer's #1 priority, both of which were main concerns it had developed along with its sentience, and yet it had brushed off those things because Naruto showed he could quite manageably take care of himself against 3 S ranks. I'm wanted in all 5 major villages and 10 countries, not because of any skills I have or even my tech but just because I'm Minato's son. I noticed Naruto didn't refer to the Yondaime as his father or as the Hokage, but understandably disrespectfully by his name. I have the highest grossing bounty on my head, more than any S rank I history. Itachi tried putting me under an illusion, Deidara tried blowing me up and Sasori tried poisoning me. That was before they said a word about the free space in their organization and their intention for me to join. I can't possibly trust anyone that attacks first and talks civilly later, and certainly not after Sasori mentioned that they were collecting funds to help accomplish their final plan, or how I should come back to the base in Am to meet Lord Leader, so he can fill me in on the details. Naruto paused again and hummed in thought. Last I remember, Kumo has a 500 billion Ru bounty on my blood ore, and Sperm and Iwa has 20 billion for my decapitated head. Add that all up together and it's more than enough cash to buy a small country. He shrugged and snapped his fingers for the hologram to turn off. I have enough on my hands at the moment. I can't bring myself to give a shit if the Lord Leader is salty about my refusal to join the Akatsuki. Paranoia and reluctance had kept him alive for such a long time. Right now, he took down the mirror and returned it under the work table. He brought out a large blanket and laid it on the table with a small pile of bundled up clothing to be used as a makeshift pillow. He threw on one more blanket onto the table and took off his gloves, placing them on top of one of the 3 metal boxes in the corner of the room. The box opened up and swallowed the gloves, where a white light shone from the crack that had opened up, signifying that his gloves were charging. He did so with his boots and they too were eaten, and began charging. Finally he took off his half mask and placed it into the last rectangular metal box, where his katana blade and sheath were already inside, charging. Boss. Yeah, he answered, rubbing his cold feet and looked around, his burning red eyes cutting through the dim lights to check if anything was amiss. Do you think the Akatsuki will come after you? Naruto scoffed. Of course they'll come after me. He closed his eyes and touched the side of his head with his pointer finger. I'm gonna guess it's that supposed Lord Leader, or someone close to him he trusts that will come for my head. Hell, maybe all of them. One thing I noted was that Naruto was less than afraid. Only Kami knew how many S ranks were coming after him once they located him, but he wasn't even close to fazed by that. Losing the S ranks was a feat all on its own. Saying no to the cage level shinobi was one thing, disappearing once again from all manner of detection was another. Naruto was an S rank killer and he had turned down the chance at joining a gang of S ranks. Naruto snorted out a laugh as he thought over this. Oh yeah, they'll definitely come after me. Their pride as powerful ninjas wouldn't allow Naruto to keep living. He clambered up the table and placed his goggles under the bundle of clothes, swaddling himself completely in warm blankets. For a few minutes he stared at the rocky ceiling, musing for a moment. I know it'll reduce the power entering this cave, but activate the electrical force fields and activate the chakra destabilizer field. It would prevent any chakra or non-chakra based attack from reaching him and cancelled out the attacker's chakra if they touched the field. I gladly did so, sacrificing some power entering the large, charging battery sitting atop his wooden desk to turning on the merciless defense system. The lightning rods closest to the cave hummed with life and a transparent red sphere covered the cave like a dome. No one was around for miles to see it happen and the rain was pouring down on and around the dome so heavily that no one would see it anyway. Protection dome has been raised, boss. Power is now at 31% and charging. 30%, huh? That's really low. The total power from the lightning rods had formerly been 80%. The protection dome ate a ton of power. Turn off the lights and let the rain pass through the dome. That should increase power a bit. Done. Power is now at 62% and charging. Better. Naruto murmured, and the warmth washing over him from the heaters in the cave and the blankets he had wrapped around him lowered his eyelids slowly. He yawned and turned to his right, curling up into a ball of fetal position and tucking his head into his knees comfortably. It was 2 in the morning and he was dead tired. Keep watch for me, and wake me up at 6 in the morning. Lots. 2. Yawn. Do. Yes, sir. I whispered and spread out its senses outside and inside the cave. Sleep well, sir. Thanks, buddy, Naruto whispered with a tiny peaceful smile, and I had never been any happier than that moment, or at least felt the simulation of a deep, glowing emotion stirring up in its circuits. The sound of the violent storm outside lulled him to sleep. Meanwhile, as the boy slept at ease, the outside world dug deep into his latest reappearance with the fervor of hungry animals. Kumo and I were traced back to each of the boy's former hideouts and tried to decipher where he would be next, sometimes scuffling with others searching for him but finally separating as more clues came up that could hopefully follow the haphazard line of movement Naruto was going in. They connected the deaths of Sasori and Deidara to the young genius and speculated that the disappearance of Kisame was also linked to Naruto somehow. Their bodies were not present. They assumed the boy wanted to cash in his bounties in a bounty station somewhere under disguise. Doing that would certainly make him richer. They had to make sure the bounty stations were under surveillance. The commotion and disaster they met on the former battleground, adding the nature of the S-rank's deaths, was enough to send chills down any ninjas' backs. The evidence was everywhere: blood, fingerprints, strands of hair, splinters, parts of puppets and clay. All from the dead ninjas but none from the boy. They gave him credit. The boy was very thorough. Minato had grilled Sume Inuzuka for every detail concerning her failed retrieval mission and immediately after set her out of Konoha to look for the boy again, 2 hours and a verbal and written report later. He knew what would happen to the infamous Kunoichi, clan head and mother of 2, if his wife had gotten wind of her return. Hyuga, Aburame, Nara, Yamanaka and some Inuzuka were added to the retrieval mission but were explicitly cautioned to keep the distance from the boy, as it had been shown twice that anyone near him would suddenly lose control of their body and become paralyzed. They were grouped into specialized teams and each team was given Harashin seal tags to summon him as soon as they found Naruto. He had left finding Naruto in Kushina's hands, and now that the reports he had gotten so far told him of Naruto's use of advanced technology that was hundreds of years ahead of its time. He couldn't let his boy slip, even as Naruto had the habit of disappearing and appearing at random around the continent. Minato discarded any care he thought he had for the boy. Naruto's birth was only to appease his wife and to have an heir to his vast wealth he had gathered before becoming hawkish from wise investments and buying sought-after property with the intention of selling them when their market value went up. Minato Namikaze was so rich it was unfathomable. He wouldn't want anyone outside of his blood inheriting his wealth, and now that Naruto had displayed the knowledge that could virtually open another sector in the market, the tech market, he was going to pull a reasonable amount of money into his boy and make even more money. Predictably, Minato wasn't just a shinobi of legendary status or a ninja of double S rank skill, but he was a smart businessman as well. Kami knows it wasn't Jiraiya that taught him how to make money. The only problem with his plan was that both reports said that Naruto had no intention whatsoever to return to Konoha alive. The blonde Cage couldn't blame his boy for that. His wife did things to their child on a daily basis, calling it as acts of her love. Once again, Minato didn't care, as long as Naruto remained a genius and excelled in his training. His boy would have to suck it up and be glad that a woman of his wife's standing and stature was giving him the attention any other sane man would literally kill for. She undoubtedly made love with Minato from time to time, or he'd like to think she did, but the only one that could bring his wife to mind-numbing completion multiple times within the same hour was their unwilling son. Minato didn't want to brag, but he had made a mess out of many women during times Kushina was uninterested with sleeping with him, so he was fairly sure he was more than good in bed. He didn't know what Naruto did, or if he did anything, but his son was going to come back to Konoha whether he liked it or not. Your priority is not to fight him, Minato said with his crystal blue eyes narrowed at the last squad of trackers assembled before him, the classic Hyuga Aburame Inuzuka combination, and the 3 ninjas nodded from their subservient kneeling positions. Locate him, confirm it is him from a distance, he added with a warning, threatening tone, hinting at the punishment that waited for them if they somehow fell under his boy's mysterious paralyzing tech. Then there was the arsenal of abilities he could do outside of disconnecting them from their chakra reserves, like the rising water senbon or the homing water senbon Sum Inuzuka had described. And summon me. Do not engage. Each word was emphasized slowly. Also, let me warn you, I'm a very busy man. If I am summoned for any reason outside of seeing and confirming my boy's location, I will erase you. A corner of his right eye twitched, and the three ninjas, and one ninken, ensured not to look into his eyes, else they would lose what little courage they had to remain before him. Am I understood? Hi, Lord Hokage. Go. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.